My name is David, and I thought I knew everything about my wife Sarah after 15 years of marriage. We shared our morning coffee, discussed our days over dinner, and fell asleep watching the same TV shows every night. Our routine was comfortable, predictable, and safe. Or so I believed until 3 weeks ago when my world turned upside down. It started innocently enough. I was leaving work early on a Tuesday to surprise Sarah with dinner from her favorite Italian restaurant when I spotted her car in the hospital parking lot. My first thought was panic. Was she sick? Had she been hiding an illness from me? My heart raced as I parked and hurried toward the entrance, the takeout containers growing cold in my hands. But as I approached the information desk, I hesitated. Something felt wrong about following her without asking first. We'd built our marriage on trust, hadn't we? So I turned around, went home, and waited. When Sarah returned an hour later, she seemed different. Not sick, but emotional. Her eyes were slightly red, and she kept checking her phone. "How was your day?" I asked, studying her face carefully. "Fine," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "Just ran some errands." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Sarah had never lied to me before, at least, not that I knew of. The next day, I couldn't concentrate at work. My mind kept wandering back to that hospital parking lot, to the way she'd looked when she came home. During lunch, I made a decision that would change everything. I drove to the hospital and asked about visitor logs. The receptionist, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, recognized me from the family photos Sarah apparently showed her regularly. "Oh, you're Sarah's husband. She talks about you all the time. She's upstairs with Michael right now, room 314. Michael. My brother Michael, who I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years after our bitter argument about Dad's will. Michael, who I'd written off as selfish and ungrateful. Michael, who I didn't even know was in the hospital. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like an eternity. Each floor that passed brought new questions, new fears, new guilt. Why hadn't anyone told me Michael was sick? Why was Sarah visiting him secretly? And most importantly, what did this mean for us? As I stepped off the elevator, I could hear Sarah's voice coming from room 314. She was reading something aloud. It sounded like a children's book. The tenderness in her voice made my chest tight with an emotion I couldn't name. I approached the door slowly, my feet feeling like lead weights. Through the small window, I saw them. Sarah sat beside Michael's bed, holding a colorful picture book. But Michael looked nothing like the strong, stubborn man I'd argued with 2 years ago. He was thin, pale, with tubes and wires connected to various machines. His head was completely bald, and his once bright eyes seemed dim and unfocused. Sarah continued reading, her voice gentle and patient, as if she had all the time in the world. Occasionally, she'd pause to adjust his blanket or offer him water through a straw. The scene was so intimate, so caring, that I felt like an intruder watching through that window. I backed away from the door, my mind reeling. How long had Michael been like this? How long had Sarah been coming here? And why hadn't she told me? I didn't confront Sarah that evening. Instead, I sat at my desk, pretending to work while my mind churned through everything I'd witnessed. The image of my brother, frail and dependent, kept flashing before my eyes. The sound of Sarah's gentle voice, reading to him, echoed in my ears. I felt like I was drowning in questions, but the biggest one was, what kind of man had I become that my own wife couldn't tell me my brother was dying? Because that's what this was, wasn't it? The machines, the baldness, the way Sarah looked at him with such careful tenderness. Michael was dying, and I'd been too proud and stubborn to know about it. The next morning, I called in sick to work. After Sarah left for what she claimed was a shopping trip, I drove straight to the hospital. Mrs. Patterson smiled when she saw me, but her expression grew concerned when she noticed I was alone. "Is everything all right, dear?" Sarah usually comes around 10. "I need to know about my brother's condition," I said, my voice shakier than I intended. "I've been out of town for work." The lie tasted bitter, but Mrs. Patterson nodded sympathetically. She directed me to speak with Dr. Rodriguez, Michael's oncologist. The word oncologist hit me like a physical blow. Cancer. My brother had cancer, and I'd been living my comfortable life completely unaware. Dr. Rodriguez was a compassionate woman in her 50s who spoke with the practiced gentleness of someone used to delivering difficult news. She led me to a small consultation room and closed the door softly behind us. "Your brother has stage 4 pancreatic cancer," she began, her hands folded on the desk between us. "We diagnosed it 4 months ago. Given the aggressive nature of this particular cancer and how advanced it was when we found it, we're looking at weeks, possibly a month or 2 at most." The room spun around me. 4 months. Michael had been fighting for his life for 4 months, and I'd known nothing about it. Does he have family visiting? Besides my wife, I mean. Dr. Rodriguez's expression grew even more gentle, if that was possible. "Mr. Coleman, your brother listed Sarah as his emergency contact. According to his file, you two were estranged, and he didn't want to burden you with this news. Sarah has been his primary support system throughout his treatment." Burden me? The irony was crushing. I'd spent 2 years thinking Michael was the selfish one, the one who'd chosen money over family. But here he was, dying alone rather than reach out to his only brother because he thought it would be a burden. "Can I see him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course. But I should warn you, the medication makes him confused sometimes. He has good days and bad days. Today seems to be somewhere in between." I walked down that hallway like a man approaching his own execution. Each step brought me closer to a brother I'd abandoned, to the reality of my own failures as a human being. When I reached room 314, I paused outside the door, gathering whatever courage I had left. Michael was awake when I entered, staring out the window at the parking lot below. He looked even worse up close. The cancer had stolen not just his hair but his essence, leaving behind a shadow of the man who used to challenge me at every family gathering. "Hey, Mike," I said softly. He turned his head slowly, and for a moment, I wasn't sure he recognized me. Then his eyes widened, and he tried to sit up straighter in bed. "David? What are you? How did you?" His voice was hoarse, weakened by months of treatment. "I saw Sarah's car yesterday. I figured it out." I pulled the visitor's chair closer to his bed, the same chair where Sarah had been reading to him just hours earlier. "Why didn't you tell me?" Michael's laugh was bitter and short. "Tell you what? That I'm dying? That I need help? We both know how you feel about me asking for anything." The accusation stung because it held truth. After Dad died, I'd accused Michael of being greedy, of caring more about inheritance than family. I'd been so angry about his lawyer, about the way he'd questioned Dad's will, that I'd cut him out of my life completely. "That was different," I said weakly. "Was it?" Michael's eyes were clearer now, more focused. "You made it pretty clear that I was on my own, David. So when I got diagnosed, I decided to honor that wish." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 2 years of anger and pride settling between us like a physical presence. I watched the steady rise and fall of Michael's chest, listened to the quiet beeping of the machines that were keeping him alive, and felt the full impact of what I'd lost through my own stubbornness. "How did Sarah find out?" I finally asked. Michael's expression softened, and for the first time since I'd walked in, he smiled. "She never stopped calling me, you know. Even after you and I stopped talking. Every few weeks, she'd check in. Holidays, birthdays, just random Tuesdays when she was thinking about family. When I didn't answer for a week straight after my first chemo session, she showed up at my apartment." I closed my eyes, picturing Sarah standing at Michael's door, probably carrying homemade soup and wearing that determined expression she got when she was worried about someone. "She didn't tell me. I asked her not to," Michael said quickly. "I begged her, actually. I was so sick from the treatment, and I looked, well, worse than I do now, if you can believe that. I made her promise not to tell you because I knew you'd feel obligated to help, and I didn't want your pity. It wouldn't have been pity, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if they were true. Would I have come out of duty rather than love? The uncertainty made me feel even worse. Maybe not, Michael said. But I wasn't willing to risk it. Sarah understood. She said she'd help me on one condition, that if things got really bad, if I was dying, she'd tell you then. I agreed because I figured I had time to change my mind. The door opened quietly, and Sarah walked in carrying a small bag from the hospital gift shop. She froze when she saw me, her face cycling through surprise, fear, and finally resignation. I can explain, she started, but I stood up and crossed to her, pulling her into my arms. I'm so sorry, I whispered into her hair. I'm sorry I put you in this position. I'm sorry I've been such a stubborn ass that my own brother felt like he couldn't tell me he was dying. Sarah pulled back to look at me, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to tell you so many times. Every day when you'd ask about my errands, or when you'd wonder why I seemed distracted. It was killing me to keep this secret, but I promised him. How long have you been coming here? I asked. Every day for 3 months, she admitted. In the beginning, it was just bringing him groceries and making sure he took his medication. But when he got too weak for outpatient treatment and had to be admitted, I couldn't let him be alone. I looked back at Michael, who was watching us with tears in his own eyes. She's been incredible, he said. She reads to me when the pain is too bad to sleep. She brought photo albums from Mom and Dad's house and spent hours telling me stories I'd forgotten. She's been more family to me these past months than I deserved. Don't say that, Sarah said firmly, moving to his bedside and taking his hand. Family isn't about what we deserve. It's about showing up. The simple truth of her words hit me like a revelation. While I'd been nursing old wounds and protecting my pride, Sarah had been showing up. Every single day, she'd been showing up for my brother when I wouldn't. There's something else, Sarah said quietly, not meeting my eyes. Something I need to tell you both. Michael and I exchanged glances. After everything that had been revealed, what else could there be? Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. Michael, remember when you asked me to help you organize your affairs? Well, I found something in your father's papers, something that changes everything about the will dispute. My stomach dropped. The will. The thing that had torn Michael and me apart in the first place. Dad had left his house and most of his assets to me, with Michael receiving only a small cash inheritance. Michael had hired a lawyer, claiming Dad had been pressured into changing his will while he was sick. I'd been furious, accusing Michael of being a greedy opportunist who couldn't accept Dad's decision. What did you find? Michael asked, his voice barely audible. Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands. I found the original will. The one your father wrote 5 years before he died, before his first stroke. And Michael, you were right. The silence in the room was deafening. I stared at the folder in Sarah's hands as if it contained a bomb rather than papers. Michael had gone very still in his hospital bed, and I could see him struggling to process what Sarah had just said. What do you mean, he was right? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer and was terrified to hear it. Sarah pulled out a document that looked official, with multiple signatures and a notary seal. This is your father's original will, dated 5 years before he died. In this version, he split everything equally between you 2 boys. The house, the investments, everything, 50-50. My legs felt weak, and I had to sit down. But the will we probated was written 6 months before your father died, right after his stroke, Sarah continued. I also found letters between your father and his doctor, David. Letters discussing how the stroke had affected his judgment and memory. And there's more. She pulled out another document. This is a medical evaluation from a neurologist, requested by your father's original lawyer. It states that your father was not mentally competent to make legal decisions in his final year due to stroke-related dementia. I felt like I was going to be sick. For 2 years, I'd carried the anger and righteousness of someone who'd been wronged by a greedy brother. I told myself that Michael couldn't accept Dad's final wishes, that he was being selfish and disrespectful. But I'd been wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. Why didn't his lawyer tell us this? Michael asked weakly. Because it wasn't his lawyer, Sarah said. 3 months before your father died, a man named Robert Kellerman started visiting him regularly. Kellerman convinced your father to switch lawyers and rewrite his will. I did some research. Kellerman had been targeting elderly stroke victims for years, manipulating them into changing their wills in exchange for kickbacks from beneficiaries. The room started spinning. Are you saying someone paid this lawyer to manipulate Dad into changing his will? Sarah nodded gravely. I think so. And I think I know who. She pulled out a bank statement. This shows a payment of $50,000 from your father's account to Kellerman's firm, supposedly for legal services. But look at the date. It was made the same day the new will was signed. What lawyer demands $50,000 upfront for a simple will? I was having trouble breathing. Everything I'd believed about my father's final wishes, about Michael's character, about my own moral high ground, it was all crumbling around me. There's one more thing, Sarah said softly. I found this in Kellerman's files. He kept records of his conversations. She handed me a transcript that made my blood run cold. It was a recorded conversation between Kellerman and someone discussing my father's case. The someone was asking about expediting the process, about making sure the new will was ironclad, about ensuring that the troublemaker brother would have no legal recourse. The voice on the transcript was identified at the bottom of the page. It was mine. That's impossible, I whispered, staring at the document. I never spoke to any lawyer named Kellerman. I never. But then I remembered. 3 months before Dad died, I'd gotten a call from someone claiming to be Dad's new lawyer. He'd said Dad wanted to discuss some changes to his estate planning, and would I be available for a consultation? I'd been busy with work, stressed about Dad's declining health, and I'd had a brief phone conversation about what I thought would be best for Dad's legacy. I'd mentioned being worried about Michael's financial habits. I'd said something about hoping Dad would be careful about enabling irresponsible behavior. I'd even suggested that maybe Dad should consider what would truly help his sons versus what might harm them. But I'd never intended for any of that to influence Dad's will. I'd thought it was just a consultation, a son's opinion being sought by a caring father. I'd never imagined that my offhand comments were being used to manipulate a sick old man into disinheriting one of his children. Oh God, I breathed. Michael, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never meant. You thought you were protecting Dad, Michael said quietly. You thought you were looking out for his best interests. But I was wrong about you, I said, tears streaming down my face now. I was wrong about everything. And then when you tried to contest the will, instead of listening to you, instead of investigating, I attacked you. I called you greedy and selfish and cut you out of my life. Michael was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse with emotion. Do you want to know the real irony, David? I didn't even care about the money. I mean, yes, I needed it. I was struggling financially, and I thought Dad knew that. But what really hurt was thinking that he'd died believing I was a disappointment. That his final act was to essentially say I wasn't worthy of being treated equally. The weight of what I'd done, what I'd failed to do, settled on me like a physical burden. I'd not only failed to support my brother when he was fighting for our father's true wishes, but I'd actively opposed him. I'd made him feel like he was alone in the world, like he was the villain in our family's story. And now he was dying, and I'd wasted 2 precious years we could have spent together. We have to fix this, I said urgently. We can take this evidence to court. We can. David, Michael interrupted gently. I'm dying. The money doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me, I said fiercely. It matters because it was supposed to be yours. It matters because I should have believed you. Sarah had been watching this exchange quietly, but now she spoke up. Actually, there might be a way to honor both of your feelings about this. We both looked at her expectantly. What if we set up a foundation in your father's name? Something that helps families dealing with elder care fraud? We could use the inheritance money to prevent other families from going through what you two have been through. It was a beautiful idea, but I could see Michael was fading. The emotional weight of the conversation, combined with his illness, was taking its toll. Let's talk about this more tomorrow, I said, standing up. You need to rest. But Michael grabbed my arm with surprising strength. David, promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't spend the rest of your life feeling guilty about this. We both made mistakes. We both let pride get in the way of family. But Sarah. He looked at my wife with such gratitude that it made my chest tight. Sarah showed us that it's never too late to choose love over pride. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and couldn't go back to sleep. I found Sarah in the kitchen, already dressed and packing what looked like a picnic basket. Another shopping trip? I asked gently. She turned to me with a small smile. Actually, I was hoping you'd come with me today. If you're ready. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in my throat. We drove to the hospital in comfortable silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I kept thinking about Michael's words from the night before, about choosing love over pride. It sounded so simple, but it had taken me 43 years and nearly losing my brother to understand what it really meant. When we arrived at Michael's room, we found him more alert than he'd been the day before. Dr. Rodriguez had warned us that pancreatic cancer patients often experienced these brief rallies before the end, but I chose to see it as a gift, one more chance to get things right. I brought breakfast, Sarah announced, unpacking what turned out to be a full spread of Michael's favorite foods from our childhood. Pancakes from the diner where Mom used to take us on Sunday mornings, fresh strawberries, and real maple syrup that cost more than most people's entire breakfast. Michael's eyes lit up. I haven't had real food in weeks, he said. The hospital stuff tastes like cardboard. As Sarah helped him sit up and arranged the food on his bedside table, I marveled at how naturally she'd stepped into the role of caregiver. She knew exactly how many pillows he needed, which medications made him nauseous, how to cut his food into pieces he could manage. She'd become an expert in caring for my brother, while I'd been living in ignorant bliss. Sarah, I said as she fussed over Michael's blankets. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She paused, looking uncertain. Do you resent me? For putting you in this position, for making you keep this secret, for being the kind of husband who couldn't be trusted with something this important. Sarah sat down heavily in the visitor's chair, suddenly looking exhausted. I wanted to tell you so many times, she admitted. There were nights when you'd complain about work or worry about money, and I'd think about how trivial those problems were compared to what Michael was facing. I wanted to shake you and scream that your brother was dying, and none of the rest of it mattered. Why didn't you? Because I'd made a promise, she said simply. And because I knew that once you found out, everything would change. I was protecting these last few months for Michael, but I was also protecting them for you. Once you knew, you'd carry this burden too. I wanted to give you both as much normal time as possible. Michael had been listening to this exchange while slowly eating his pancakes. Now he set down his fork and looked at both of us seriously. I need to tell you both something, he said. Yesterday, after you left, I called Dr. Rodriguez. I asked her to be completely honest about my timeline. My stomach clenched. What did she say? Days, not weeks, Michael said calmly. Maybe a week if I'm lucky. The cancer has spread faster than they expected. The room felt like it was tilting. A week. We had a week to undo 2 years of damage, to say everything that needed to be said, to be the brothers we should have been all along. There's something I need you both to help me with, Michael continued. I've been working on something these past few months, and I want to finish it before I can't anymore. He reached into his bedside drawer and pulled out a leather-bound journal, worn from handling. I've been writing letters, he said. To Mom and Dad, to you, David, to Sarah, to friends I've lost touch with. I wanted to leave something behind that wasn't just about being sick, you know? Something that showed I lived, not just that I died. He handed the journal to Sarah. There's a letter in there for you. For everything you've done, for everything you've been to me when my own brother couldn't be. You saved my life, Sarah. Not from cancer, nothing could do that. But you saved me from dying alone and bitter. Sarah was crying as she accepted the journal, holding it like the precious gift it was. And David, Michael turned to me. There's a long letter in there for you too. But I want to tell you the most important part in person, while I still can. He took a shaky breath, and I could see the effort it cost him to stay focused. I forgive you for the Will thing. I forgive you for not believing me. I forgive you for the 2 years of silence. But more than that, I understand why you did it. You were trying to protect Dad's memory, trying to be the good son. Your heart was in the right place, even if your actions weren't. I started to protest, to say that understanding didn't make it right, but he held up a weak hand to stop me. Let me finish, he said. The thing is, I need you to forgive me too. I was proud and stubborn. When I got sick, I should have called you myself instead of putting Sarah in an impossible position. I should have trusted that you'd choose love over pride, the way she did. I let my hurt feelings keep me from my brother, and that's time we can never get back. Of course I forgive you, I said immediately. There's nothing to forgive. There is, Michael insisted. Just like there was nothing for you to forgive, but you needed to hear me say it anyway. This is how families heal, David. We acknowledge the hurt, we take responsibility for our parts in it, and then we choose to love each other anyway. The next 6 days passed in a blur of hospital visits, quiet conversations, and shared memories. Sarah and I took turns staying overnight in Michael's room, and I got to witness firsthand the incredible strength and grace my wife had been showing for months. She never complained, never showed frustration, never made Michael feel like a burden. She just loved him, purely and unconditionally, the way family should. On Michael's last day, he asked Sarah and me to do something specific for him. He wanted us to call our father's old friends, the people who'd known him before the stroke, and tell them about the foundation we were planning. He wanted to make sure that Dad's real legacy, his kindness, his generosity, his love for his family, would be what people remembered. Promise me, he whispered, his voice barely audible now. Promise me you'll take care of each other. Promise me you won't let pride win ever again. We both promised, holding his hands as his breathing grew shallow and peaceful. Michael died that evening as the sun was setting, with Sarah reading him one last story and me holding his hand. His final words were, "Thank you for showing up." Later, as Sarah and I sat in the hospital parking lot, emotionally drained but somehow at peace, she turned to me with something that looked like a secret. "David, there's one more thing Michael asked me to tell you, but only after he was gone." I braced myself for another revelation, another piece of the puzzle I'd been missing. The foundation idea, that wasn't mine. That was his. He'd been planning it for weeks, hoping you'd eventually find out about his illness and that we could do it together. Even dying, even after everything that happened between you two, he was still trying to find a way to heal your relationship and honor your father at the same time. As I absorbed this final gift for my brother, his faith that love could triumph over pride, his belief that our family could be restored, I realized that Michael had given me something more valuable than any inheritance. He'd given me the chance to become the man Sarah had always believed I could be, the brother he'd always deserved, and the son our father had tried to raise. The touching reason Sarah had been visiting Michael wasn't just her compassion, though that was remarkable enough. It was her unwavering faith that families can heal, that love can overcome pride, and that showing up, even when it's hard, even when it's complicated, even when it requires keeping painful secrets, is the most powerful thing we can do for each other. In losing my brother, I'd found my way back to the kind of person I wanted to be. And in watching Sarah love Michael unconditionally, I'd learned what it really means to be family.